In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to measure a crankshaft. The measurements that we take on a crankshaft are for runout, and then we will measure each journal for taper and out of round. And so to begin with, we'll measure runout with a dial indicator. To do this, we've got the crankshaft. In this case, it's part of a crankshaft sitting in V-blocks that we made out of wood, and so that it can rotate. Now this can also be done with the crankshaft sitting in the engine block with the bearings still in place. You always place the dial indicator on the center bearing, and what we're looking for is warpage, which translates into runout in the crankshaft. So we set up the dial indicator. We zero it, and then we rotate the crankshaft. You have to be careful the dial indicator won't fall into the oil gallery hole. You can watch the needle moving on that dial indicator. Indicating that it had about 5/1000ths of an inch of runout as it was rotating. Okay, so next we will measure the taper and out of round of the journal. Come over to this one here. That's done with a micrometer. And on each journal on the crankshaft, you'll take 6 measurements. You measure on one edge of the journal in one position. You turn the micrometer using the ratcheting mechanism on the end and make sure that the micrometer will slide easily across the journal, but that you can feel that it fits tightly. And you'll measure first on one side, so measure right here. You lock your micrometer and take your reading. And then you'll measure directly in the same position, but directly across the journal on the opposite end. You compare those two measurements to each other, and that'll represent taper. If the journal is smaller on one end than the other, you'll see that show up in that measurement. Now, if there isn't much taper or wear in the journal, you won't have to change the micrometer again. You can just use it and slide it across. We'll do the same thing in 2 other positions. We take those 2 measurements and compare, and then we do 2 more positions finally. So you take 2 measurements in 3 different positions around the journal. So you divide the journal into 120 degrees, and so you'll do measurements here, here, and here. You compare the side-to-side measurements to each other to find out what your taper is, and you compare the measurements going around on each end to each other to find out how much out of round there is in that journal. That measurement's repeated for each of the journals on the crankshaft, including the main journals. We'll do the same thing on the main journals.